Whether your advisory firm has 1 or 5 people, compliance will always be an issue. RIA Compliance Concepts is more than just another service provider. We truly care about seeing our clients prosper. That's why we started our podcast, the RIA Compliance Collective, providing up-to-date compliance guidance. We're passionate about doing our job so you can focus on doing your job. We understand regulatory compliance like the back of our hands, from full-service RIA registration to annual compliance reviews and everything in between. We're here to get you there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the RIA Compliance Collective. I'm Megan Campbell. On with me today is Ivan Barretto and Collin O'Brien. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
I'm doing well. It's a Friday, so TGIF.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, today's podcast is somewhat of a special edition. We're over halfway through the year now, which I'm still amazed by. And as everyone may know, the Office of Compliance Inspections and Examinations, or OCIE, comes out with its exam priorities report at the end of every year. So we're going to take a look at how OCIE's stated 29 priorities are tracking so far this year and what they've seen so far during this year's audit cycle. Now, OCIE's strategies are to prevent fraud, monitor risk, inform policy, and promote compliance. Ivan, how are they upholding these strategies this year?
So in the preventing fraud part of their strategies, their examinations of investment advisors that the SEC has put forth is basically to prevent harm to retail investors, especially seniors, as well as those saving for retirement. So some of the examination focuses have been identifying advisors that have been selecting more expensive mutual fund share classes for clients versus recommending low-cost share classes to clients. And that's some of the primary focuses of their examinations. Also, the failure to disclose the differences of these product types to potential clients. They've also been focusing a lot on the branch office activity of a lot of RIA firms that have branch office locations. Some of the things that we've heard from the SEC is that, in this digital space in which everything is being done remotely nowadays, is focusing on the protection and prevention of cyber breaches because of these remote locations. So there's a lot of focus on basically doing exam or looking at policies and procedures regarding branch offices working remotely, as well as people that are not in official registered branch office locations that are working remotely in non-branch office locations. They're also focusing on basically do the policies and procedures address the potential concerns and risks of cyber breaches or data breaches for those locations. Another thing SEC has been focused on is the new digital assets space, in which a lot of advisors are coming across digital assets as a new form of investment for potential clients. Well, they're focusing on obviously the disclosure, because some of these digital assets that are available to the investing public, they're still considered a speculative investment because there's a dramatic price volatility in the market for some of these cryptocurrency assets and so forth. So the proper disclosure, if an advisor is recommending these types of products, the proper disclosure needs to be in place for that, and making sure that there's no misleading disclosures or omitting disclosures regarding these types of investment types. And then the next part of it, and you see this in the news all the time, where their concerns are about the custody of these digital assets, or basically wallets or vaults that keep these cryptocurrencies, making sure that they're safekeeping these types of assets, because you see in the news all the time that some of these vaults are being hacked into and raided and so forth. So that's an extreme concern for a lot of the regulators when you're looking at these types of investments. As far as the informing policy, the regulators basically are focusing a lot on vendor management, which is obviously, so in this day and age, a lot of advisors are using various vendors to help manage their practice, whether it's CRMs, email providers, that are on the cloud-based servers, share file services where you're storing client records. So there's a big focus on vendor management and making sure there's proper due diligence in place for some of these vendors that a lot of the RIA firms are using to help with their practice. Other things that they're looking at, fixed income cross-trading practices, They're looking at money market fund rules as part of their examination focus. So those are some of the things that they're looking at for informing and the forming policy strategy that they have. Now, as far as promoting compliance, they're coming out with regular risk alerts to SEC firms. And if our listening audience is interested, you can go in and sign up for these risk alerts at the SEC website, which will have links in the show notes on how you can get these risk alerts. But that's part of the outreach promoting compliance part for OCIE, is that they're doing regular risk alerts. They also have a national compliance outreach seminar for investment advisors and investment companies. So this is an outreach event that RIAs and investment companies can take part in which they discuss issues such as fees, expenses, portfolio management trends, cybersecurity compliance, and any other hot topic issues. So that's what they're doing to help with the transparency and promoting compliance in the RIA community as a regulator. Now, as far as fostering transparency, the OCE has published the following risk alerts since publication of the 2018 priorities. Collin, what has the OCIE talked about in these publications?
Well, Ivan, there's been a couple of risk alerts that have been put out that cover several topics, and there's a couple of topics that really relate to the investment advisor community. We're talking about best execution, electronic messaging, and employee training and supervisory review. Basically, the topics that are really a concern with a lot of RIAs and their compliance programs. A couple that I really don't, with like best execution in today's environment, it's mainly about disclosure. With the price of conducting trades is not like it was 20 years ago, where you bought a couple of shares, it cost you $100. But nowadays, it's mainly on how the qualitative review for that trade is, whether it's conducted by the broker-dealer on a timely matter and that it's being executed on the price that you're requesting, which requires investment advisors to conduct best execution reviews. You need to make sure that you're doing comparison between all the broker-dealers to make sure that you're being executed in a fashion that's best for your clients. And doing this review, you can document the efficacy of the service that you're being provided by that broker-dealer and having the best service for your clients. Also, you need to disclose what they're also bringing to that is you need to disclose the best execution practices. Some advisors have complicated systems in place to make sure that they are getting the best execution for their clients if they're doing block trades or if they're running on a very non-liquid market. Say if you're trading bonds, there's offers to sell and offers to buy that you have to basically jump the gap in order to come to that execution for that trade. And another thing is soft dollar arrangements. A lot of times advisors don't really recognize that they're receiving soft dollar benefits because they just sit there and jump on their platform and do the trades and get the information and go about their business. But if they're offered a trading platform that is basically catered to them, that not a regular investor can receive, then that needs to be disclosed. And they come up, the SEC, well, OC, has come with several findings that, they're not reporting, that investment advisors are not reporting this. And it all kind of boils down to making sure that investment advisors have the adequate policies and procedures relating to best execution, which take into account reviews, which takes into account internal controls and follows the best methods to basically serve their fiduciary duty. Another item that was brought up is advisory fees. Now, all of us have been doing exams. We were former regulators, and you kind of think that I still today scratch my head over the years and years of doing exams, but you kind of think that it's just a simple, basic Excel spreadsheet math, easy. But it's so common to come across advisory fee problems. The calculations sometimes just don't work. I don't know why, but advisors need to have a method to look back to make sure that their fee schedules are being upheld by their monthly billing. They need to also disclose every single item that relates to the fees, whether they're getting like rebates, whether they're getting kickbacks from the broker dealer, and making sure that, they uphold what they agreed to on the contract. And that's just not being done. Another thing is if they're not following the breakpoints, if you're investing into a mutual fund family. And there's, believe it or not, that's always been kind of a topic that we've always hit upon. Another item is electronic messaging. A lot of firms don't permit electronic messaging. Because that's basically written correspondence and it needs to be maintained. There's some programs like Barretto offers that service. And I strongly suggest if you're going to use text messaging, seeing that's so popular nowadays, that it's used. Also, you have to cover the instant messaging via Facebook or Instagram to make sure that they're supervising that correspondence with their clients too. There's a lot of different avenues for this, and it's kind of complicated, the advisory environment. The way to make sure that you supervise this is making sure that all the employees are trained and they can accurately define what different avenues to do for all these different items. If you can sit there and write a compliance manual, and if you have an employee that doesn't understand what is correspondence and what is not, that can be an issue. And the way to do that is having a good training program and making sure that you record the test and have employees test to what different items that they have to monitor. And that's just all part of the supervisory review and making sure that you cover all those avenues, which leads to a lot of different items that gets thrown on the chief compliance officer's plate that they have to cover. But that being said, we go through a downturn and everything. We've all handled, at least us, have handled several complaints in our history. And if people start losing money in a downturn, they're going to start pointing fingers. And if you're not supervising that correspondence, they're going to bring stuff out of the woodwork saying he said this or she said that. And we're going to ruin up some reps' U4s. So it's always a good idea to be overly cautious when it comes to correspondence with clients and making sure that you document everything, that make sure that you capture everything so you don't get into that hot water, because nobody wants to do that. And you need to control not only what they say, but the devices that they use too. One thing that always scares me is that, and I don't use them anymore, thank the cloud for that, is thumb drives or storing anything on a separate hard drive or what have you. That stuff can be stolen in a New York minute. Yet you have to make sure that if you have a rep that uses a thumb drive, that it's encrypted. So if he accidentally leaves it at a table in an airport, that information is still secure. I strongly suggest that you don't. In today's environment, you have cloud services that are secure, that you can just upload that information, and wherever you have the internet, you can get to. And that's a lot of the OC's focus when it comes to cybersecurity and that sort of thing. There's also another little factor that always worries me, because we all travel a lot, conducting business and everything, is just even notepads, making sure that you don't have any personal identifiable information on notepads, because that can be left or stolen or what have you. I had my car broken into 3 years ago, and they stole my regular notepad out of it. I guess they thought it was like an iPad cover or something like that. So, there's several different items that you got to be aware, you got to have concern about in order to protect your client, because nobody wants to see the clients hurt and nobody wants to be on liability on that one. Megan, has there been any risk alerts put out since the exam priorities?
Yeah, there's been a couple, primarily about privacy or Reg SP, and then third-party security as well. So first and foremost, OCs frequently having issues with firms and their privacy policies. Primarily, they're seeing issues regarding notices and opt-out provisions, a lack of policies and procedures. Surprise, it feels like there's always that catch. And policies that don't actually reasonably safeguard client information. So to dive a little bit deeper regarding the notices, a few things that OC staff has seen are notices not even being sent out. So initial notices, annual notices, opt-out notices, that those aren't even being provided to customers. That's a huge problem in and of itself and as an easy fix, right? They're also seeing when these notices are being provided that they're not actually reflecting the firm's policies and procedures that are in place, that there's a mixed match there. And that again is a very easy fix for your privacy policy and your notices. They also have noted that the privacy notices that are being sent out and provided to customers, that the notices don't include that opt-out provision so that customers can opt out of the RIA sharing their non-public personal information with unaffiliated third parties. That opt-out provision is huge and it needs to be in there. It needs to be in your procedures and in your notice. And so the staff's saying that that opt-out provision isn't included. Another thing they're seeing regarding policies and procedures is one, that there's no actual policy and procedure written, that in people's compliance manuals, it's just a regurgitation of the safeguards rule. And a regurgitation of a rule is not a policy and procedure. So that's something you need to be aware of. You can't just restate the rule in your manual and think you're one and done. You actually have to have your procedures in place. They're also seeing something we've seen before too, is when you maybe buy a template compliance manual and privacy notice that the blanks aren't filled in. So they're actually seeing the policies and procedures there with numerous blank spaces designed to be filled out by RIAs, but the firms aren't actually filling those out properly. And then the other thing that they are seeing is that when the firm does have a policy that addresses the delivery and content of the notice, that the procedures aren't really whole. They're not taking into account all of the safeguards rule. So, when you're looking at your procedures and your notice, make sure your procedures are written, that they're customized, and that they're complete. Those are the biggest things. And that obviously goes for your privacy notice. The third main thing they're seeing with Reg SP stuff is that the policies, they're not implemented or they're not reasonably designed to safeguard the customer records and information. So your policies and procedures should, 1, ensure the security and confidentiality of customer records. 2, protect against anticipated threats or hazards. And 3, protect against unauthorized access that could result in substantial harm or inconvenience to your customers. So the biggest things that they've seen, and Collin kind of hit on this, right? Personal devices. Do you have procedures in place that allow your reps to use their personal devices? If you do you have procedures in place to configure them correctly? Are you training your staff so that they know how to configure their phones, how to configure their laptops? If that person leaves, do you have something in place to remove access and wipe those devices of client information and firm information? Do you have training and monitoring policies in place so that they know what they're able to do and what they can't do? That they know that they can, for instance, you can send personal identifiable information, but only via encrypted emails. Do they know this? Have you trained them? Do they know that they should not use unsecured networks? They shouldn't go into Starbucks and log into Starbucks network with a firm device or a personal device that has customer information on it. So some pretty basic stuff that's easy to shore up, right? The second major risk alert was regarding safeguarding customer information and customer records and information in network storage using third-party security features. Now, I'm just going to hit the high points on this because it can get kind of wonky, just to be honest. But the 3 biggest things that this risk alert mentioned was that firms should adequately configure the security settings on their network storage solutions. That is the number one way to protect against unauthorized access. You should also have your policies and procedures obviously in place regarding how this configuration should be. 2, and Collin hit on this as well, inadequate oversight of vendors. Make sure that your security settings on your vendor-provided network storage solutions are configured to your firm's standards. You do this through your policies and procedures, and you do it through contractual provisions with that vendor. And then the third thing is classify your data. Your policies and procedures need to identify the different types of data stored electronically by the firm and the appropriate controls in place for each type of data. How will it be configured to protect you and your firm? Like I said, it can get a little wonky once you start talking about network and data security. That doesn't mean you should avoid doing it just because it's scary or different or uses terms you're not used to. That's the business now. Everything is electronic. Everyone's using vendors. Everything is electronic these days. And that's the number one way your client's information is vulnerable. So you have a duty to protect that information to the best of your ability.
Yeah. And Megan, the SEC, these releases that they put together have some good points. And then part 2 of this series, we'll look into what this next year is going to bring and how we can better prepare for or help you prepare for examinations and more important aspects of strengthening your compliance programs. Another note is obviously we covered a lot of SEC risk alerts and information about registered with SEC as an RIA. That NASA, which also does their own examination report, they've come out with an examination report from 2017. The reason that there's not something addressing 2018 examination information is because they're on a 2-year cycle. So by next year, they'll start putting together another examination report for the 2-year window, giving some insights of what the state regulators are seeing as part of their examinations and putting together a report to address that. So we didn't want to completely exclude all of our client, our types of listeners that are SEC and state registered, because the reasoning behind that is the older examination report from NASA really isn't addressing the current issues of today, even though there may be some, blending over into the SEC's risk alerts and so forth. As far as examination priorities, it still is not as up to date as what we see from the SEC. So
there tends to be a little bit of like bleeding over between the two. So the states will kind of look at what the SEC has seen, because some of these things that can be industry wide. You want to make sure your best execution reviews are done. You want to make sure privacy policies are correct. So they're all very similar. So they kind of take cues from that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're pretty much good and are ready to wrap up, Megan.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of information today, and I hope everyone enjoyed the podcast and that it was formative and useful. We'll have links in our show notes to that exam priorities report, the risk alerts we've discussed, and also we'll provide a link to the SEC site where you can sign up for those alerts. And you can also go to that site and you can sign up for state alerts and stuff like that. So it's pretty informative so that those go directly to your inbox. Otherwise, we want to thank you all for joining us today and hope you join us again next time on the RIA Compliance Collective. Until next time, we're here to get you there.
Thank you for listening to the RIA Compliance Collective. Your support is greatly appreciated. If you want to experience the RIA Compliance Concepts difference yourself, visit riacc.io. From mock audits to customized compliance procedures, ongoing compliance assistance, and beyond. We're here for you always. Keep listening to discover more on how you can keep your advisory firm compliant so you can focus on achieving your goals. RIA Compliance Concepts. We're here to get you there.